This episode of Q Point Podcast is pre-recorded, produced and sponsored by Karina Quirk, broker at Next Home Experience.
Different views.
I know your story.
From different cues.
Incredible job.
He's David Quirk.
You brought it up.
And she's Karina Quirk.
Imagine.
This is
Q Point.
Joining us now in studio is Maine Republican gubernatorial candidate Garrett Mason. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, we know you're busy on the campaign trail. Thank you for coming in and spending some time with us.
Oh, I'm thrilled. Anytime I can get north of Bangor, I'm good. So that's great.
So you were first elected at age 25. What originally pulled you into politics at such a young age?
My journey to politics isn't that much different than most people. There's always a radicalizing moment where you realize that the government can have a big say, not just in your own personal life, but in your business life as well. I know you guys see that all the time. But I wasn't originally interested in going into politics. I wanted to be in sports. I was a really bad athlete, but I loved sports in general. And I had this epiphany moment in college where I realized that there was a business around sports. Somebody had to sell the hot dogs. Somebody had to sell the advertising. There was a legal component with players and their contracts and negotiating with sponsors. And that really appealed to me. So that was my mission. And I ended up going to work for the Portland Sea Dogs. I worked in vending one year to try to get myself into their internship program. And I did, and spent a whole summer working with them. I completely loved it, but it started to suck the fun out of the actual game for me. So I moved into hockey and worked for the Lewiston Maniacs Hockey Club. They were in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. So we played teams all over maritime Canada and Quebec. And I did that for 3 years. Through a strange twist of fate, I ended up running the business operations of that club when I was 23 years old. While I was there, the legislature passed LD 1495. That was 102 new service and labor item taxes. And it was everything from your haircut to a clown at your kid's birthday party. And one of the items on that list was entertainment tickets. And we fell into that. And it would have meant tens of thousands of dollars to a team that was already struggling. There was no secret at that time that it was hard. It was the beginning of the financial collapse in 2008, and people weren't spending as much of their disposable income on entertainment. So it was that moment when I got that potential bill of tens of thousands of dollars that I was like, I'm working my tail off to keep this place afloat. And the government just comes in and smacks you upside the head. I found out my senator voted for it. And I said, well, I'm going to run against him. So I did. That was one of those seats that nobody thought a Republican could win at that time. And we just worked hard, knocked on 10,000 doors in that cycle. I still have all of my walk lists from that time, all the notes of the people that I talked to. And on election night, I will never forget watching Cindy Williams call my race. The first race called in the state Senate on election night 2010. And that was just the beginning of a conservative wave. We won the state Senate that night. We won the House that night. And obviously Governor LePage was elected and forever changed the course of Maine history. So that was my moment of how I got involved, because it certainly was not my plan. That's for sure. But that's what's wonderful about Maine. That story can be repeated for hundreds of people that have served in the Maine legislature. Hundreds. That's what I think is so special about Maine, is the people truly have a real say in who is being elected in Augusta.
So what are you seeing different now from when you campaigned back in 2010?
I think one of the big things, when I went to Augusta at first, people would say to me all the time, everybody's corrupt in Augusta and blah, 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 blah. And I could honestly go out and say, listen, I think you're talking about Washington. It's not the same in Augusta. That's not the same. I can't say that anymore. That for me is personally painful, to not be able to say it's not the same. It is. You have a lot of corrupt backroom deals. You have people doing bad things. You have people being very dishonest. And you're at a point now where you have members of the legislature, depending on the letter of your name, they won't talk to you. And that wasn't the case. We didn't do that. So that's one of the things that I think is very, very different. It's a lot harder to get things done. And I lay a lot of that blame at the feet of Governor Mills. There hasn't been a single Republican vote for a piece of budget legislation in 8 years. So Republicans have not had a say. And it's not because Republicans won't sit down. It's because the Democrats have played dirty tricks on politics of getting a budget passed. People wonder, why has the budget almost doubled in 8 years? Well, it's because you don't have any Republican restraint on that legislation that is the budget. So when I compare 2010 to 2026, that's my biggest thing that I see. It is very much a duplicate of Washington. And I think that we need someone who was effective back then and understands the process that is the legislature, but also has the relationships to be able to get things done. In 2010, when Governor LePage came in, he was very clear that he wanted to reduce to elimination the income tax. That's been a Republican piece for a very long time. We did that. In 2011, in that first budget, we did that. We lowered the income tax. We eliminated 70,000 people from the tax rolls entirely. And we did that with Democrats. We did that with Democrats. And you look today, a lot of the same people who voted for that tax decrease just voted for millionaire's tax. So it's all about the approach. It's all about leadership and bringing people together and telling them, hey, this is the best thing for Maine people. I've done that before, and I know I can do it again. I have a lot of the same relationships that I had back then, and I think that's what the difference in this election is. All the other guys in this race are wonderful. We've been on the trail together for what seems like a decade. But I think what makes me different in this race is experience and proven results.
Is that also a hindrance for people out there saying that you're an insider?
When I got into this race, I told people I was not going to pretend to be something I am not. I'm going to lead with truth. I'm going to lead with honesty, and I'm going to tell people how it is. I think when you say that to people, sometimes they think that you're going to be crass and beat somebody upside the head, but that's not always what truth is. I told everybody, yes, I work in the Capitol. I'm there almost every day. I served in the state Senate, but you wouldn't want a plumber who didn't know how to plumb your house to do the job. And I think that it's very similar. I've been very honest about the fact that I have been in the job for a long time, but that's what we need right now. We were talking, people can watch the Q Point Minute, but what's my biggest priority? It's the budget. I think if we have somebody who's never been there before, and this happened to Paul LePage, right? This isn't a knock on him at all. But when Paul LePage came into office, I think we were all surprised. I think all of us were surprised on election night, and especially when we woke up in the morning and saw that he had won. He was not ready at that time for what was coming to him. I tell this story all the time. When we came into office, Governor LePage got handed John Baldacci's fifth budget because that process starts in August. And that isn't Democrats trying to pull one over on us. It has nothing to do with that. It's the timing and function of when the Constitution dictates a budget is due. You have to take 5 months to build that budget. And if we have a governor who walks in on November 7th, whatever the day after the election is, and said, all right, let's get cracking on a budget, you've lost. You've lost. You're already behind. So I think someone like me who can come in and know that process and understand how it works, that's important. If I'm the nominee for the Republicans, starting in August, I have a full team behind me. I have a great list of legislative endorsers who have written budgets. I've been negotiating as leader right alongside of them. And we are going to start crafting a first Mason budget, not a fifth Janet Mills budget. I remember, and this is the biggest thing, the day after the election in 2010, we walked into the Hall of Flags and we were introducing Maine to the new Republican majority. And there was people giving speeches and whatever, Josh Tardy and people that were involved in that election. And I remember standing there with my cousin, Dale Crafts, and we were watching people walk up and down the stairs. They'd stop and they'd look and they'd cry and hold each other. And I looked at Dale and I said, Dale, these people are so happy that we're here. And he laughed at me. He said, Garrett, these people are not happy we're here. They are Democrats and they are going to lose their jobs. But that's what the next governor is up against, is a very embedded bureaucracy. It's nice to say, I don't have any experience and I'm going to come in, I'm going to clean house with a fresh perspective. But these people have been working on embedding themselves for 20 years. And so many of them waited Paul LePage out. They just waited him out. We have to have somebody who went through that time with Paul LePage, understands what governing means, but be able to go in there and rip out the rot, root and stem. And we don't have time for somebody to miss a year and a half learning on the job. And that's my pitch to people, is that, yes, I've been on the inside, but you can see my record. And it's very clear what I will do when I get in there.
So what happens if the Republicans don't take the Senate and the House? Is that going to be harder for you to govern?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, I would love nothing more than to walk into the 2010 Redux. I would love that. But is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? Probably not. You have a good chance at winning the House. The Senate's a little bit of a taller mountain to climb. But that is why it's even more important to have somebody in there with experience. because the only opportunity you're going to have to influence policy and make real lasting changes is in the budget. Because at that point, Democrats won't be able to do what they did to Republicans over the past few years. They're not going to be able to say, well, we're just going to pass a budget on a majority and the governor will sign it. I won't be doing that. They're going to have to work with Republicans to get something accomplished. And what that means is we're going to be negotiating for things like lower income taxes. I'm not going to sign a budget that has the quote unquote millionaires tax on top. I won't sign that. So they're going to have to work on that. I'm not going to sign a budget that doesn't take more people off the tax rolls. That's a commitment Maine Republicans have all made. We are going to reduce the income tax. I'm not going to allow DHHS to continue to allow children to die. I'm not going to do it. Over the past 8 years, 150 kids have died after contact with Janet Mills' DHHS. That's a problem. I'm not going to continue to allow vagrancy to go unpunished. I'm from the southern part of the state. You go to Portland, you go to South Portland, and the streets are just filled with people doing drugs, like an open air drug den. It is horrific what's going on down there. And I'm not going to allow that to continue. And that means implementing some vagrancy laws. There's a lot of things that I'm just not going to allow if it's not included in the budget. That's the difference.
Speaking of the millionaire tax, we had Chamber President Mr. Woodcock on, and we were talking about trying to bring more businesses into the state of Maine. Do you think by raising the taxes on the millionaires is going to bring more business into state of Maine?
No, not at all. I think one of the things the Democrats don't understand is that if you're making that much money every year, if you're making $1 million a year, you can just leave and you can still operate your business, but you can just move your residency. And they say, oh, well, that's not going to happen. Look at what's going on in New York City right now. They're just leaving, guys. So I have a lot of people who are high net worth individuals that are friends of mine. And that's just the conversation. Is like, at that point, you're saving tens of thousands of dollars. And it's like, well, I'll just go buy a new house someplace else with the savings that I'm going to have. I'm not paying those taxes. So no, not at all.
And obviously a business could do an ESOP, which would be employee owned, and therefore the company pays zero taxes.
Exactly. And that's the other thing I think Democrats miss too. People who are incredibly high net worth and are making that kind of money have tax people that prepare on things exactly like this and will strategize and figure out how to avoid a certain tax. It's foolishness. This is absolute foolishness. I told this story in my convention speech, and I'll tell it again here now. You guys know former Senator Brian Langley. Brian worked 35 years to build up his business from, I think it was a smelting shack on the Union River, and built it into one of the finest summer Maine restaurants that there is. And he sold it the same week that the millionaire's tax was passed. He's going to be a millionaire for 1 year in his entire life because he sold his business, and Maine Democrats wanted to take a piece of flesh on his way out. And if he would have sold it in November, he wouldn't have had to pay that.
You are listening to Q Point Podcast. I'm Karina Quirk, co-hosting with my husband, David Quirk, and we are having a conversation with Maine Republican gubernatorial candidate, Garrett Mason.
Now, in some states, they're trying to do a wealth tax. So if you had a house that's worth $5 or $6 million, say you lived in there or got passed down, it happens to be on the coast, everything's inflated, and you're 70, 80 years old, and next thing you know, they want to come after you because you have that asset of $5 or $6 million, and they want to tax that at anywhere from 2 to 5%. How do you feel about that?
I would flip it on its head a little bit and use a little bit of a different asset as an example. Farmland, farming. I'm passionate about agriculture. It's no secret. I've done a lot of work in the agriculture space for clients at the State House. But I have serious concerns, especially in Aroostook County, Washington County, the larger places in our state, of implementing some sort of death tax, wealth tax like that, because it's no differentiation between the house that you just described and 10,000 acres of potato field with equipment. I am very concerned about that because in a time that we're losing farms left and right, if you implement something like that, you're going to sweep those people right into that. And you're going to lose generational farms at the time they get passed down because they won't be able to pay that tax. They're land rich and cash poor. And they do it because they love what they do. And it's generational and it's honoring to their family and their legacy. But so many people that are voting for these types of things in Southern Maine, the members of the House and Senate that are from those places, they don't even have any grasp. Some of them have probably never even been north of Bangor and understand that we have industrial family farming in this state and it's precious and needs to be protected. That's some of the stuff that really bothers me when they try to play class warfare because you don't understand. You can hate on a millionaire, but there's a lot of people who are millionaires on paper, but they're not.
That's correct. for S Corps, if they're moving the money through and they're actually using it on equipment.
Yeah.
And we've had this conversation with most of our guests here on both sides. There should have been a carve out.
100%. Yeah.
The state of Maine, small business is 137,000 small businesses in Maine.
Yeah.
And they are not necessarily millionaires, but it may look like it on paper. And it's just one more hit.
Yeah. And that's some of the stuff that we should be really proud of and incentivizing. I mean, the fact that we have north of 10% of our population that are small business owners, it's 1, 2, 3 people that are most of these companies. These are people that are slugging away every single day. My wife builds custom homes, and there's a lot of money that goes through that business every single year, but that doesn't mean there's a lot of profit there. Of course, she makes some money, but like, it's not understanding what you're putting people through when you start to play class warfare is very dangerous. We have way too many people doing that in Augusta right now.
Obviously, we're doing our podcast today on May 1st, May Day, and it's the start of the Maine Paid Family Leave Act.
Yep. Horrific piece of legislation. I'll give you an example of how poorly crafted that was. Me and my business partner, there's only 2 of us that we own the company and we work at the company. And we originally thought, and this is coming from somebody who worked in the Capitol as this was being drafted and lobbied on behalf of industry on this bill. And I said, oh, no, we don't have to pay that. We own this business. We don't have any other employees, so we don't have to pay it. So Paychex called and said, you need to set up your paid family medical leave portal. And I was like, well, we don't have to pay that. You know, there's 2 of us. Like, well, how much of the business do you own? There's 2 of us. We each own 50% of the business. It's like, well, you don't own a majority, so you have to pay for it. There's only 2 of us that work in this business, and we will never take advantage of it because we just won't. You know, we're business owners. We're just not going to take advantage of it. And we have to pay every single month. It's not a life-ending amount of money. It's not like it's the end of the world to pay that bill. But it's just another dollar that's not going into the economy. It's going into an insurance trust that's going to be used by people whose cats got sick and they needed some time off to process it. People laugh at things when I say that, but that's how the law was written. It's not like my grandmother's sick and I got to go take care of her out of state. It's that, but it's also if there's someone or something that feels like family to you, then you may take this leave.
I'll do you one better. I'm a business of 1.
Yeah.
Real estate. I'm the only employee. And I've stated on here before, I have to pay in. I'm never going to use it.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you going to ask yourself for time off?
I might, you know, maybe I should.
Well,
maybe I should.
Maybe she might have anxiety and take every Friday off for the summer, which obviously can be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm never going to say I have anxiety.
I know I get a lot of anxiety around Friday in July.
I find it interesting. And matter of fact, the Chamber President Woodcock happened to bring this up, but he said, you know, it starts May 1st, which is just in time for all the seasonal businesses to open.
Right.
And this is their only time, right? This is when they need to make the most money. And now people are going to be taking off time.
Yeah. Those seasonal jobs, that typically happens right about now. Some of the seasonal stuff starts happening and ends around October 15th, around Columbus Day. That just happens to be around 180 days. So depending on how long you're open, are you going to have somebody that comes to you on October 14th and say, listen, I know I'm getting laid off tomorrow, but I got to go to Florida to take care of my aunt, so I need to take paid family medical leave. That's a possibility. That is a real thing. They should have done what New Hampshire did, a voluntary program. The other thing that they did with that was just criminal, is you had companies like BIW who ended up taking the state to court on this that had perfectly fine, acceptable, even more generous paid family medical leave plans that the state said, no, you still have to pay into the insurance trust during the year of no benefits. It's just robbery. It's just robbery. And there was other companies who were getting their plans denied, all because they needed to suck money out of businesses to fund this program. There's better models for this. Listen, you guys have been around in politics and in business forever. I know that if somebody came here, one of your salesmen, and said, I got some problems, you guys would do everything that you could do to make sure they were taken care of.
Which we've had and done.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I just talked to a gentleman last night, farmer in Lewiston. Same thing. Said, I don't need that. We'll take care of our employees. And they know it. I think that it's the big difference between conservatives and liberals. Conservatives believe it's in their inherent responsibility to help their fellow man, and they don't need the government to tell them that they need to do the right thing by the people that they're employed by. So it's just a really horrible program and something that needs to be reversed at best and amended if we can.
Well, you brought it up. Let's talk about DHHS, and LD 127 seemed to go down in flames. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, DHHS is just a dumpster fire. It's horrible what has happened over there, specifically around the Office of Child and Family Services. And what that bill would have done, it would have given the legislature access to critical, confidential case files so that they could begin to investigate and find out what is going on over there. We have the highest rate of child deaths per capita of any state in the country. And we're also the oldest state in the country. So these are kids that are wards of the state, or very closely could become wards of the state, who are dying after contact with DHHS. That's not saying that like DHHS personnel is doing anything nefarious. There are kids that are seriously falling through the cracks. And what those case files would do is it would allow the legislature to begin to understand, like, what are the systematic things that are going wrong? What is happening with these kids after they're contacted? It was unfortunate to listen to some of the Democrat arguments on the other side in the legislature because they were saying, well, HIPAA, you can't reveal confidential information. The federal law specifically says, unless the legislature is investigating. And that was conveniently ignored by people that are lawyers in the state Senate. And I have to compliment, I'm very close to him, but Senator Jeff Timberlake has carried the mantle on this with Senator Brad Farron and has exposed these things after the untimely death of former Senator Bill Diamond, who I served with and have great respect for. That department, we have to, and I think every Republican candidate for governor has committed to this. I could be wrong, but you have to separate that office into its own department. It has to be its own department with its own commissioner because it is clearly not getting the attention that it deserves. That's something that I will commit to as governor. I want people to understand how horrible the situation is for kids in foster care. There are kids who are being what's called hoteled. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
There was one child who was hoteled for 14 months. And that means that they lived in the hotel with a rotating staff of social workers. They didn't have a home. They didn't have a place to go. They were in a hotel while somebody else took care of them. Different person every week. That is not acceptable. You have kids who are being moved around, yanked out of school in the middle of a year that are foster kids with no regard for that child's well-being or whatever kind of normalcy that you can provide them. There are children who all at the altar, and listen, I love this, but the goal of the state and the stated goal of the state is family unification at all costs. That is not appropriate for every situation, and it should not be the goal for every child. We have to start taking these situations seriously and immediately. You can't just get a report and add it to the stack. Real-time investigation. That bill would have started the process on that, and it is a shame that Maine Democrats went home without addressing that.
You are listening to Q Point Podcast. I'm Karina Cork, co-hosting with my husband, David Cork, and we are having a conversation with Maine Republican gubernatorial candidate, Garrett Mason.
I find it ironic that she vetoed the right to repair bill, which makes everybody's data available for any gas station, parts store, or anybody else. But now all of a sudden they want to protect the data of a child that could be dying or harmed. It just doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. I think when it comes to civil liberties and things like this, the Democrats love to conveniently use one side of the argument or the other, depending on who you are. And it's what concerns me about some candidates on the other side, on the Democrat primary, is civil liberties mean different things to different candidates. But in this specific case, we have to know what's going on. You have to know. And you can still shield these kids' identities. There's redactions that can be made. You can make sure that things are done on the up and up. But yeah, it's definitely a different side of the coin when it's not a tractor or a car, right? But we clearly have a problem. To just say, well, we can't do anything about that because we want their privacy protected. The federal law specifically says we can if the legislature is investigating, and the legislature clearly wants to investigate. So I think you could deal with this issue. It just takes some political will. And I don't know that there is even any political will that's necessary because this is a winning issue. If you want to talk pure politics, this is a winning issue. I don't even have to poll it. I'm sure it's a 90% issue. It just seems nonsensical.
So it seems like we're going to have to wait for a new governor.
I think so.
Speaking of investigations and DHHS, what is your take on all of this alleged MaineCare fraud?
I'll start with a story. So when I was elected in 2010, I remember the big issue du jour was EBT card fraud. In fact, former Congressman Bruce Poliquin, when he was state treasurer, who I know you know very well,
I do.
he was very helpful in this. But EBT card fraud and abuse was everywhere. Any store you went into, you would see somebody fraudulently using an EBT card. When we got into office, we found out that it was so much worse than we actually knew. People were selling their EBT cards at pawn shops for less than what was on the card so they could have the cash. People were withdrawing money from ATMs on their Pine Tree card at strip clubs, in five-star resorts in the Virgin Islands, at Disney World, at the casinos. And these were all Maine EBT cards that were getting hits on ATMs at these types of places. And we stopped that. One of the first bills we did was we reformed some of these issues. Governor LePage, to his great credit, went in and made some changes to the EBT card and having pictures on them so you couldn't sell them anymore. We fixed a lot of those things. But the problem is when you have extremely generous social welfare programs like we have in Maine and have been wildly expanded over the past 8 years, is that fraud will always find a way. So the EBT card fraud and abuse that was 2010 is now the home health care agencies and autism services of today. You have to have somebody who can understand when a report like that comes out. I think what the Maine Wire is doing with investigative reporting is exactly the kind of thing that needs to happen. It's exposing light on this, and a responsible government would take that article and say, hey, come in and tell me what you found, and we're going to fix it. But that's not what's happened. It's being ignored. The autism fraud is obviously endemic. You see the same thing happening in California with hospice. You see the same thing happening in Minnesota, in Maine. So it's not like, is this happening? Well, it's happening in all of these other places with generous social safety net programs. So there's no question that it's happening here. Listen, I'm from Lisbon, right outside of Lewiston. I drive through Lewiston almost every single day. You drive down Lisbon Street and you can see some of these businesses that look like, wait a minute, what is that business? And it's not a store, it's some sort of home health agency. And I want to put a face on what this really looks like for people, what this actually looks like. So you take somebody who's fraudulently doing home health care. Now, what does home health care look like? Well, it looks like this. There's somebody who has some sort of cognitive disability, and maybe they're older. Maybe they have Down syndrome and can't take care of themselves. And they're maybe in their 30s or 40s, and their parents have passed on. They get taken care of by a home health agency. So if somebody can get their social security number and somebody can start billing for them, they get the money for that. Well, I think that's a worthy thing, that the state should be taking care of people like that. But when there's fraud involved, you're taking advantage of that person. You're taking advantage of that person, especially if they're not getting any care at all. And what's been uncovered is that there are people like that living in slums because they're not getting taken care of and they're getting thrown in there. There was one person I've heard of that hadn't had a shower in months, and it's because it was being run by a fraudulent company. That's what the real face of this is. It's not just about the person taking the money. It's about the person that's taking the money and not taking care of somebody in society who needs a lot of care. You also take with the autism services, right? CDS right now, if you have a child that maybe you're starting to wonder, like 6 months, 8 months old, are they deaf? They're not responding to their name. Maybe they're not starting to talk when they're supposed to be saying some words. 6, 8 month wait just to get in at CDS, just to get in. Now we're hearing claims of autism fraud. Could that be because there's communities in this state that are claiming that their children have autism and they don't? And it's hindering people who actually need those services? That's what the face of this is. It's not just about some criminal ripping off the system. It's about the people who are not getting the services that we are paying for. And that I think all of us around this table, and certainly most of the politicians in the state would say, no, we need to fund that. We need to make sure that that safety net is around for those people. Those are the people that aren't getting the services and are being used. And the fact that it's more politically convenient to ignore the issue because someone on the right is talking about it is wrong. It's wrong. And yes, I want to prosecute these people, and we need to. And there's ways to do it. We passed bills to do it, and the Mills administration didn't want to do it. It's about making sure that these people are getting the services they need, because if we're not taking care of the poor and the elderly and the disadvantaged, then we are not the way life should be. We're not. And that's what's happened.
You would think that there would be a little bit of oversight, an inspection or something, just to make sure that these funds are being used appropriately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We actually did pass some legislation when I was in the legislature that required investigatory services in DHHS, which are there, but they're not fully staffed. They're not getting what they need to do done. Also, we have given out too much. You can't get your hands around it. We have to pare back the department. We have to pare it back. We are not able to offer the services that they want to offer because we don't have the personnel and expertise to do it. That is just as bad. I remember back during the pandemic, everybody was getting that free money and they were coming in and buying cars and four-wheelers and all the toys. I remember going to lots and there was nothing there. There was nothing there. It's kind of useless to go on and advertise, hey, come buy a car if you don't have one. It's the same thing with these services. It's you can say, oh, we're going to give everybody autism services. Oh, we're going to do all this home health care. You can't do it because you've let too much fraud go on and you've let too many people take advantage of the system and you don't have the people to administer it and make sure that it's being done correctly. And I would rather, and this is just a basic business philosophy, under promise, over deliver. Make sure that you can offer the service that you say that you're going to do. And that happens everywhere in government. Everywhere. They promise you the moon and they deliver nothing. Nothing.
And yet they keep increasing your taxes.
And they keep increasing your taxes. I was on a show the other day and they were kind of trying to hit me on, you want to eliminate the income tax. You want to work towards that. And it's like, yes, I do. And the question was asked, well, how much of the state budget? That's 40% of the state budget that is income taxes. And I said, yep. Ironically, that's less than the amount that government has increased over the past 8 years. So if we just went back to pre-COVID era spending and left room for inflation, you could eliminate the income tax tomorrow. But taxes just keep going up. The services are just getting worse. It's time for somebody to get in there and understand where these problems are. And I think I'm that guy.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 with Maine Republican gubernatorial candidate Garrett Mason. Make sure to tune in tomorrow, Sunday, May 10th at 6:30 a.m. on VOM, The Voice of Maine.
You've been listening to Q Point.
Follow us at qpointpodcast.com or on your favorite streaming app.
This is where you can get the news from the people who make the news.
Make sure to join us next time.
We hope you tune in.
Q Point Podcast invites guests and candidates from all parties to join the conversation. The views, information, opinions, and comments expressed during this program do not necessarily represent those of the host, Q Point Podcast, associates, affiliates, and CQRE LLC.
Thanks for being a part of the conversation.
The most important voices aren't always the loudest ones. They're the voices of everyday people, raising families, running businesses, serving their towns. That's who we want to hear from. Share your ideas with us online, and let's make sure those voices are never left out. Find us on Facebook or on X or at qpointpodcast.com. We look forward to hearing from you.
Catch every episode at qpointpodcast.com or wherever you stream. Tune in and tell your friends.